UN week in New York also about Russia-NATO tensions. The Security Council taking up the case of the 3 Russian MiGs that, according to Estonia, stayed in its airspace for 12 minutes last Friday, ignoring warnings from Italian jets from NATO's Baltic air policing mission before being escorted away towards the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad. This incident follows the estimated 20 drones that recently landed inside of Polish territory. Before the Security Council, some strong words from the EU's head of foreign policy, the former Estonian Prime Minister, Kaja Kallas.
It cannot be that Russia accidentally violates 3 times in 2 weeks European airspace. And if it was accidentally, it was a mistake, there has been plenty of time for Russian Federation to apologize and say, sorry, we made a mistake. Instead, we see a pattern. Russia is testing European borders, probing our resolve, undermining the security of the whole of Europe. Russia will continue to provoke as long as we allow it.
Yeah, no apology coming from Russia. Instead, this response earlier from the Kremlin.
Our Ministry of Defense categorically denied these claims. Furthermore, our military statement cited objective monitoring capabilities. We have never heard the Estonians claim to have data from objective monitoring capabilities. Therefore, we consider such claims void, ungrounded, and continuing an unbridled policy of inciting tension and provoking a confrontational atmosphere.
Well, joining us, our guest was Ukrainian Prime Minister after the Maidan Revolution of 2014. Today, he chairs the Kyiv Security Forum. Arseniy Yatsenyuk, thank you for being with us here on France 24.
Thank you, sir.
Your reaction to what's happened in Poland and what just happened in Estonia?
Well, look, nothing new. The designated war criminal Putin is just testing the limits, and he is pushing the boundaries of NATO and of the free world. Let me remind you that more than 24 of drones have actually made an incursion into Poland, and 3 fighter jets did the same in Estonia. And you just presented the mouthpiece of President Putin, but there was another response from Putin just a few hours ago. So he deliberately summoned his National Security Council in order to deliver a clear-cut message to the West. A new stage of nuclear saber-rattling against the West. This is the response of Putin. So it is crystal clear that this is a sniff test of Putin, whether the Western allies are ready to commit to Article 5 obligations. And as of now, the response is not as good as everyone expected.
Just to remind our viewers, there is a meeting on Tuesday of NATO leaders, what's called Article 4, which is, I guess,
It's a consultation.
Consultation.
Right. Article 4 is consultation. Article 5 is an action.
It means an attack against one is an attack against all.
Correct.
We have Lithuania's defense minister who posted on social media, Turkey set an example, an allusion to 2015 when there was a Russian fighter jet that ventured for 17 seconds into Turkish airspace and was shot down. The pilot was killed. Is that what should have been done when there were those drones that were fired upon Poland and with these Estonian jets?
I could hardly imagine what would have occurred during the Cold War if, for example, Soviet or Russian jets would violate the airspace of NATO member states. No doubt that these fighter jets had to be shot down, period. Because Putin understands only the message of action, but not a lip service. And as of now, we have plenty of different perfect statements, amazing messages, but actions, bold and strong actions are needed. And the same happens with Ukraine. Very strong resolve and very strong action against the Putin's war in Ukraine.
All right, let's listen to another reaction. This is from the Polish Prime Minister. There was not just the overfly of that island off of Estonia. There was also, according to Warsaw, the violation of the safety of the Petro-Baltic drilling platform in the Baltic Sea. Now, Warsaw notes this was in international waters, but listen to the language of Donald Tusk.
We are ready to make any decision aimed at destroying objects that might pose a threat to us. such as Russian fighter jets, if they violate, for example, if they fly over our territorial waters. I also need to be absolutely certain, and you understand correctly, I won't elaborate on this, that all our allies will treat this in exactly the same way as we do.
All the allies, Arseniy, Yatsenyuk? Or is there one that's wavering, the United States?
Well, that's a $1 million question. President Trump, he just gave an interview a few hours ago, and he said that he stands by the US commitment to support NATO member states, and that he's ready to make a bold action. But once again, whether it is to come, whether it's true, all depends on the US right now. And look, Putin is trying to play Trump, it's clear. But I still believe that Trump will never allow to be humiliated by Putin. And Trump is quite unpredictable, because a lot of folks, they didn't predict that Trump could hit Iran with a missile attack. But it happened. So this gamble that Putin launched against the West and this kind of provocations that Putin started to make could have very bad and dreadful implications for Russia. But once again, it all depends on our unity.
Well, that's the thing. We had the first instance over Poland, and those drones fell over a period of 6.5 hours. And then this flyover, 12 minutes on Estonian airspace. Why weren't those Russian MiGs shot down?
Well, they had to make it. I believe this test...
They should have shot them down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Once again, look at the history of the Cold War. This is under the obligation of every NATO member state. That's my humble opinion. This is the way I read Article 5. And this is the way Putin reads it. If he doesn't see any kind of strong response, he will move further with another incursions, with another acts of provocation, and even he is considering an option to wage the war against the Baltic states. And I fully share take of the European Union High Commissioner and all our Baltic states friends that, look, they are in danger. And it's all due to the fact whether Americans are ready to support NATO. So there is no other option for the United States rather to stand by the NATO and to help Europe to deter Russians, and to help Ukraine to deter Russians.
Many of our viewers, they're too young to remember the Cold War. When there is nuclear saber rattling, as you say, from Moscow, they're scared.
And this is another weapon that Putin has in his war chest. So he...
But is it legitimate to be worried? Is it legitimate to be worried about nuclear saber rattling?
It is always legitimate to be worried, but it's more legitimate to find a remedy against these kind of worries. That's what FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, said. The main fear is fear itself. So it is Putin that has to be scared of nuclear potential of France, of the UK, of the United States, and of entire NATO. And it is Putin and autocrats that have to realize that you guys stay united and you can punch these kind of dictators and aggressors. As we did, I mean, Ukrainians, no one expected that Putin, who actually crafted a blitzkrieg to take over Kyiv just in 3 days, that he will fail. And Ukraine is fighting like hell for 3.5 years against an armed to the teeth nuclear state. So we are an example. So follow the line.
So what does Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, say to Donald Trump? They'll be meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly this week in New York. What does how does he broach this with Trump?
It seems to me that they got along. The relations between Trump and Zelensky are much better than Putin expected. Let me put it this way.
Despite that meltdown we saw in February at the White House.
Right. So this is the bad part of the history. We turn this page. I believe that President Zelensky will send a very clear message to President Trump. The world is watching you, Mr. President. You have enough strengths. You are very strong. You are bold. But whether you are ready to act, that's the way the history will judge you. And we heavily rely on you, Mr. President. And we believe that you are to defend sovereign and independent Ukraine with our Western allies. Otherwise, you will be humiliated by dictators. And Putin is not the only one. It's a cohort. It is a huge alliance. It is a nexus of new evil under the auspices of China. So if the US wants to lead the world, to lead the free world, they have to act. And I still believe that President Trump will act.
Is the same Donald Trump that was president once before, or is this a different Donald Trump?
Well, here is the thing. Francois, during his first term, he decided to supply a lethal weapon to Ukraine. Maybe you remember, and your viewers let me recall, that he decided to supply Ukraine with Javelin anti-tank missiles, contrary to his predecessor, Barack Obama. This time, President Trump expected to get some kind of concessions during this notorious Alaska meeting with Putin. But he was played out by Putin. And now it's time to act and for him to make a U-turn against Russia. But once again, let's wait and see. That's what usually Trump says. Let's see what's going to happen.
Because there was still this talk, reported White House aides quoted by the Reuters news agency, still, as of late last week, was still pondering whether or not to keep up the same level of support for the NATO frontline states. Of course, this was before the latest incidents. Trump changes his mind a lot.
But an entire political U.S. establishment stands by the NATO. Look at Republicans and Democrats in the House and in the Senate on the Hill. They are very articulate and they are very strong in their statements in supporting Baltic states, in supporting eastern flank of NATO, and actually in the U.S. commitments to execute Article 5. So Trump is dependent on the views of his political establishment and on his voters. An overwhelming majority of Americans strongly oppose Russia. An overwhelming majority of Americans believe that Russia is actually a threat to the U.S. national security. So, and this plays into our hands, I mean, in terms of increasing the probability rate of the right decision of President Trump. And the right decision is to provide support for Ukraine, to actually be very strong in supporting NATO, and to present one united front with the European Union in imposing secondary sanctions and secondary tariffs on Russia. But once again, Putin is closely watching whether this lip service transfers into some kind of actions. As of now, no. But there is no way to delay the decision. Otherwise, this is going to be a disaster for the US and for the White House.
Arseniy Yatsenyuk, you talk about Vladimir Zelensky learning on the fly how to better manage the relationship.
And your president is doing well. I mean, President Macron and UK Prime Minister. So you guys know the playbook.
But what about Zelensky himself? How has he changed in the time that he's been president? Is he different?
My country has faced a tremendous challenge, historic challenges. And it seems to me that President Zelensky has changed a lot. He's the different president. He's the wartime president. I was the first wartime prime minister, and he is actually the second wartime president, but he fully understands the historic momentum, and he fully understands that the history lies on his shoulders.
Arseniy Yatsenyuk, I want to thank you so much for being with us here on France 24. One last question, though. We talked about Russia and Russian meddling. Being here in Paris, do you feel elements of Russian language sometimes in the people you speak with? Russian influence, how far does it reach?
You know, you have a quite strange history of relations with Russia. You know, you were always excited by so-called Russian culture. That's another weapon of Russia. The Russian culture happened in Bucha, in Mariupol, and all over Ukraine, with the tortures, rapes, and killing. This is the Russian culture. Thanks God, I haven't had Russian language in Paris in the last 24 hours.
All right, we'll leave it there, Arseniy Yatsenyuk. I want to thank you so much for being with us here on France 24.
Thank you, sir.
Stay with us, there's much more to come, more news plus the day's business. And in sports, could be a Frenchman who wins the Ballon d'Or European Player of the Year. We'll tell you all about it.